What's going on, everyone? This is David Greene, your host of the BiggerPockets Real Estate Podcast, joined today with my good buddy Rob Abasolo for an episode of Seeing Greene, where we take your questions from the BiggerPockets growing and thriving community and answer them so everyone can learn how to make money investing in real estate. Rob, how are you today?
I'm good, man. I am becoming a regular at Home Depot all over again. I'm doing a remodel. It feels like I know everybody there. They're greeting me at the door by my name. And I forget how expensive things are. You know, it all adds up.
Are you checking the thermostat before you leave the house and being angry because it's set too low?
I was, but we just got a new AC at my house, which I'm happy about because my house is cold, but I'm sad about because it's very expensive to replace an AC. And honestly, it is good to be home again. For a little bit there, things were tense because it'd be 100 degrees outside, but like 80 degrees in our house. So, you know, all is well in the Abasolo household. How are you, buddy?
That's great to hear. And if you're like Rob, you can kick the sawdust off your New Balance tennis shoes that you picked up at Home Depot, tuck your polo shirt into your Dockers pants, and strap yourself in because we have a banger of a show for you today. Rob and I are going to talk about using the sneaky rental strategy even when your debt to income ratio is having a hard time keeping up, much like Rob's AC. How to handle bookkeeping as you scale your business but cannot afford a full-time bookkeeper, much like Rob cannot afford Home Depot. Consolidating your debt and going through home refinances so that you can purchase more real estate of which you might need to rehab, like Rob at Home Depot. Nice. All that and more in today's awesome show that is not sponsored by Home Depot, but probably should have been.
Oh, and most importantly, while we're here, if you want a chance to ask your question, please go to biggerpockets.com/David. The link is in the description, in the show notes. Pause this, send us your question, and I can tell you I got some inside knowledge that if you ask a question, you have a very high percentage of us answering it. So go do that real fast.
Great point, Rob. Let's get to our first question of the day. All right, our first question of the show comes from Benjamin Sargent in Utah. Benjamin is currently wanting to invest in the area where he lives, which is Ogden, Utah, and surrounding areas. He bought his first house, which is a house hack, and is looking to buy a second property. I love the advice that you give of buying a new property every year and moving into the new property and making the old one a rental. My question is, how do you qualify for financing to do this? The house I bought 4 years ago was $250,000 and now is worth $415,000. The median home price is now $490K. I got a promotion at work with a pay raise and I put in more hours but can't qualify for a new loan. Do you turn the house into a rental before you can use the rent as income so the first property won't count as debt anymore? Thanks for all you do, Benny.
Sir, yes, sir.
Yeah, that was a Sargent joke, wasn't it, Rob? I see what you're doing there.
It was Benjamin Sargent. Sir, yes, sir, we'll answer that question. Okay, sorry, carry on.
Let's talk about sneaky rental tactics in real estate for Benny Sargent here. First off, what do you think about the strategy of you buy a house, you live in it, and then you move out of it when you buy your next house, turning it into a rental that you only put 5% down on instead of 20%?
Fantastic. I actually think it's I've done some version of this. I didn't carry it on for every single year, but I've tried it. I love it. I think the interesting thing is that it kind of works for anybody. I think it's honestly great for people that don't necessarily want to go all in with real estate. They don't want to just scale to like 100 units. They could just buy one every single year and just kind of build up a portfolio of 5-10 houses over the course of their career. And I think that's a very easy way to retire as a millionaire, in my opinion. Now, what he's asking is, do you turn the house into a rental before you use the rent as income so the first property won't count as debt anymore? It's my understanding that you're going to be working with your loan officer to inform them that this will be turned into a rental, and then they will then take 75% of that rental income and apply it towards your DTI. Is there a seasoning period in which you do have to have that rental income coming into the bank account?
So for most loans, you're going to have to show that you've been collecting rental income on it. Many lenders will give you an exception if you have a lease in hand from a tenant saying how much they're going to be paying.
Correct.
And they will usually let you take 75% of that income. They're assuming that 25% of it is going to go to pay for repairs and vacancy and all the other stuff that you've got. And they'll take 75% of that income and use it to off balance the debt that you took on, like the mortgage, like the taxes, like the insurance that's already there. But it's not a guarantee. So this is one of the reasons that the advice I often give is that people need to live beneath their means. Because if you're cutting it really close with your debt to income ratio and then you take on another mortgage and you can't buy your next property, this can be a problem.
Sure.
However, if you're saving more of your money and you're not taking on debt, you don't have to worry about needing to show the income from the house before you can get the second one. The other thing is if you use a debt service coverage ratio loan to buy an investment property, this doesn't apply. It just doesn't work that good because usually you're trying to buy another sneaky rental. So you're going to have to use a conventional loan to put 3 to 5% down.
Yeah, so let me just break this down a bit because I think the specific question is that gap in between renting the property that you own now and I guess buying the new property. And I think what Benjamin here wants to know is exactly what you said. How fast do I have to have a lease? Is having a lease good enough? Or do I actually have to take rental income? And if I have to take rental income, how can I possibly do that if I'm living in the house? That's what I think is sort of the issue here. Or I guess that's like the big question.
Yeah, you'd have to show I have a lease that's going to take place and dated for next month or 2 months out. And they're going to pay me X amount of money for rent. It starts on this date. At that point, they would let you do it. But he might have to find somewhere else to live for a short period of time. You might have to move into a short-term rental, a medium-term rental, a family member while they're shopping for that house. That first one is tricky if you're cutting it really close with your DTI. 100% true. But then once you've got this first property as a rental and you're showing the income for it, and then you buy your next primary residence, you've already got the rental income. Then you do this again, you've got more rental income. With every property you buy, you're picking up more rental income, but it can be hard to get it started. Kind of like getting a kite off the ground.
Sure. It does seem pretty interesting because you basically have to work for it at super speed. You have to get someone to agree to move into it like a month later, which is probably a little bit harder than having it be available a little bit sooner. And then the second part that makes this really tricky, especially if you're married, especially if you have kids, is having to find somewhere to live for a month. Moving in with your parents, moving in with a friend, Airbnb-ing a house. It's sneaky and it's tricky, but good things come to those that put in the work, I suppose, right?
Yeah, I wish there was an easy answer for the people that have a family and this is intrusive, or that have a spouse that is hesitant. I just don't think there's a way around that obstacle. You got to figure out how to make it the least intrusive way possible and know that it is a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. But if you want the benefits of a 3% down mortgage, a 5% down mortgage, instead of a 20% down mortgage and the better interest rate, it's going to cost you something. It's probably going to cost you some comfort.
For sure. But that's why it's so great.
Yes, it's what's that Dave Ramsey line? Live like no one now so you can live like no one later.
Yeah. Did he say that? That's not his phrase, is it?
Yeah, he says it all the time. But he says it better than I say it. He says it with that. Where's he from? Tennessee, probably? Tennessee accent.
Yes, I think he says live life now so that you can live life like no one can later. Stupid.
You just rushed your way through that to get to the stupid. I saw what you did, and I'm here for it.
Exactly.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you, Mr. Sargent. Hang in there, man. We want to hear how that goes. All right, our next question comes from Austin. Austin says, I'm looking to expand, but I'm being overwhelmed by the amount of work required to keep it all organized. Oh, I love where this one's going. Yeah. I have 7 doors personally and another 4 with a partner in a 2-member LLC. I had one accountant give a quote that was quite high for a small number of properties, and QuickBooks eliminated their desktop platform. Yeah, that's been a bit of a pain for me too, because we like the QuickBooks desk option. Does anyone have any QuickBooks alternatives that work for class tracking and or can recommend an accountant, ideally in the San Diego area, that would be able to get us going in the right direction? All right, before we get into this, if you're looking for an accountant in the San Diego area, don't be surprised if you get a really expensive quote. I think rent on houses in SD right now, they're like $6,000 a month for a 3-bedroom type of property. It is very expensive to live in that area. People are going to charge more. I am sure if you go to like Ohio or Kansas or something, you're going to find a bookkeeper that will work a lot cheaper. So quick tip there, look for places with a lower cost of living to hire remote workers. But before we do, Rob, you and I have had the bookkeeping discussion. Your books are clean, mine are dirty. Yours are simple, mine are chaotic. I think we got really good response from the last time we went into like bank accounts and LLCs and bookkeeping.
Right.
What's your thoughts on Austin's dilemma?
Okay, couple of thoughts. So he's at enough doors and enough properties, in my opinion, to justify a bookkeeper. The hard part about bookkeeping is that typically bookkeepers charge like $500 per entity, sometimes per property. And for a lot of people, $500 per month is their profit on a property, whether it's long-term or short-term. What I've always heard is like when you have 1 to 3 properties, you can kind of track all of your expenses in an Excel sheet. Once you move past 3 properties, it's pretty hard to do that. So a couple of things in terms of finding a tax Pro. You can head on over to biggerpockets.com/taxpros to find tax and financial planning professionals. So a little plug for us there. Secondly, as a BiggerPockets Pro member, you actually have access to Stessa, and it's included in your membership, which helps investors manage and optimize their portfolios. You can use Stessa for things like accounting, tenant screening, financial reporting, all that good stuff. Now, in terms of what I'm using these days, I actually just found this new bank that I like, and it's called Baselane. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
So Baselane is like a online one of the new online banks out there, and basically they integrate a super simple bookkeeping software into the banking. It's like kind of crazy. It's very intuitive. You can actually start a bank account per property and assign expenses at the end of like pretty much every day if you want to, but you can categorize every single expense per property, and it's actually making my bookkeeping pretty simple. And David, get this. This is a new one for me. They have APY on their checking account anywhere from like 1% to 4% at the moment. It depends on what the Treasury is doing. But depending on how much money you have deposited in there, you can have up to like 4% APY. So it's kind of like one of those things that I just started using them, and I'm like, this seems too good to be true. But so far, they're actually pretty good.
APY stands for annual percentage yield, I'm going to assume.
Yes. And you could use that really, I think, at his scale at 7 doors and do a lot of it. I've talked to my bookkeeper, Matt, at TrueBooks, and he was basically saying, hey, with these softwares, they're always great, but, your tax people still have to go and reconcile some of the expenses. So I don't know if it's 100% perfect quite yet, but from my experience, it's actually been pretty simple. I've just switched over all my real estate stuff to that. So I'll report back in a couple episodes if it's still working out.
That's an amazing answer. Thank you for that. I was going to say, just look for an area with a cheaper bookkeeper and say, I want limited service. How cheap can you do it?
Yeah. I guess it's a much shorter answer than I just gave, but this is really topical, especially for short-term rental hosts and long-term rental hosts that do their own bookkeeping. But it's like bookkeeping is such a horrible like expense for the mom and pop person.
Yeah.
And I think it's a huge gap in the market. I think it's a huge issue for people like Austin here. So I've been doing a lot of research into it. So that's why I'm like, all right, hey, this is working. I'm going to keep trying it. So I'll let y'all know if it works well. But for me, so far, so good. Now, David, if I remember correctly, you hire a bookkeeper, right? Full-time?
Have my own bookkeeper that works for me. Yeah. So she handles it for me. But for most of my career, I had to outsource that or just not have it done at all. So here's something I was thinking when you were talking there, Rob. If I was in Austin's position here, I would reach out to me or someone like me and say, hey, I need this specific bookkeeping service. How many hours do you think it would take of your time to do this? And can I pay you to use your bookkeeper for my thing? Because someone like me might be like, all right, I don't know that I need my bookkeeper to work 40 hours a week. She's probably not working all that long. So if Austin needs 2 hours of work or 3 hours of work, we can do that for X amount of money. And it's going to be cheaper than going to a bookkeeping firm and trying to hire someone who's going to find a way to extend 3 hours of work into 20 hours so they can justify charging you for that. And it's going to be cheaper than hiring your own full-time person that you don't need, but it's probably going to take a little more work. You're going to have to ask around quite a bit before you find someone that's willing to take their staff member and pull them off of what they're working on, or has a full-time staff member like me that doesn't necessarily have full-time work. So what my plan is I want to hire a couple like VA bookkeepers to support my main bookkeeper, and then start taking on additional bookkeeping services for small business owners with those people to eventually earn enough income to pay the salaries of that staff and get that expenses off my books.
Man, that's crazy. So you have a full-time. Yeah, I'm probably not super far from there, but man, it is expensive. I hired a VA, a virtual assistant in the Philippines that was relatively inexpensive that did my books, but inexpensive oftentimes ends up being the opposite of that. So I quickly switched over to TrueBooks, and it's been better. It's been more seamless.
There you go. So we covered it from every single angle that we possibly could to everyone listening. Hopefully,
yeah, I think so, actually.
One of those 4 different trails that we offered will offer you the scenic view that you were looking for your own books. All right. Our next question comes from Billy in Detroit. Why don't you take this one, Robbie?
Oh, Billy. Yeah. Okay. Question 3. Consolidating credit card debt, best options. Billy says, my wife and I currently own 3 doors and moved to a new larger city in hopes to continue our real estate investing journey. Over the past year, we have dealt with death in the family, 3 totaled cars, medical bills, moving expenses, job change. It has been turbulent, but things are finally settled. We finally renovated our home and are stable, but we have amassed around $40,000 of credit card debt that we need to pay back. We make combined around $150,000 a year and would like to consolidate. I looked into 0% interest credit cards to balance transfer, but with my self-employment income and my wife's name change, it's proving to be a nightmare. Is there any private or better option for debt consolidation? Once we get that credit card balance taken care of and on a stable payment, we want to aggressively pay it off while saving for our next BRRRR. Okay, so basically he wants to know, what is the best consolidation practice for all of my debt? I would say top of my head, I would often say the 0% interest credit card. Sounds like he's having a tough time getting a credit card, so that's unfortunate. I don't know. He says he owns 3 doors. So my first question would be, do you have any equity in those 3 doors? And could you possibly get a home equity line of credit to consolidate all of your credit cards? Now, you're still using basically a credit line to consolidate credit cards, but at least it's one payment. And if you can save money on that monthly payment, then you can basically just aggressively attack principal. And hopefully it's at a lower interest rate in most cases, like a home equity line of credit, than a typical 25 to 30% interest credit card.
Well said. Now, in addition to your comment about 0% interest credit cards, I have found the cheapest rate in general is going to be secured debt, usually secured by real estate. So a mortgage ends up being the lowest interest rate that a person can get to consolidate debt. Now, you can't just go get one unless you have a solid debt to income ratio or debt service coverage ratio on properties. You're taking on debt to pay off debt. You got to remember that. This isn't like free money, but you're usually going to get a much better rate on secured debt than on unsecured debt, like a credit card. So I would consider, especially because you're getting usually a tax incentive here, a tax write-off if you're going to take on secured debt. It's an expense in a business as opposed to just unsecured debt, which is used to buy personal items. So take on that debt on a mortgage, use it to pay off your personal debt, and then please, for the love of everything good, don't go run up that credit card again, because now you're stuck with mortgage debt and more unsecured debt with a high rate, and that's where you get yourself into big trouble.
If you can't get a hold of a home equity line of credit, pay off that lowest credit card that they have. And if that's a $200 monthly payment that they get rid of, take that extra $200 that they would have paid and apply it towards that next highest balance, and keep doing that over and over again until you have no more credit card debt. That's going to be probably the more traditional way of doing this.
I think that's really good advice. The key here is you get out of debt and you don't get back into debt, and you put your focus on something positive like acquiring new assets instead of something negative like spending money for fun and acquiring more debt. I found that the people that have a goal like buying real estate tend to get much more serious about their finances and where their money is going than when you don't have a goal and you just have this overall sense of, I should be saving money, but it's hard to be motivated. Kind of like when you took that fitness journey, right, Rob? Like when you had, hey, my goal is to hit this weight or to hit this body fat percentage, you were eating very specific food every single day and working out a very specific way versus, yeah, I know I'm not supposed to eat sugar, I'm not supposed to eat carbs, but you're much more likely to do it.
Totally. I actually am not anti Dave Ramsey methods at all, as much as I like to have fun here. I actually think it makes sense for people in this situation when you have lots of credit card debt to do whatever it takes to get out of credit card debt. I've known a lot of people that were like super religious Dave Ramsey followers. They did it. What's funny is that it's kind of that overcorrection where they go so hard to eliminate debt that I've seen a funny amount of people kind of go the opposite direction immediately after and get like a new car or a pool or whatever. So I have seen that. So I would say attack the credit cards as hard as you can and try to just practice simple financial habits afterwards. It's not sustainable to, diet super hard and work out 6 times a week and like be super, super crazy, because eventually you're going to burn out. But what happens is you work super hard towards a goal. Once you hit that goal, then you can kind of not necessarily completely let up, but you can institute more sustainable habits. But I think being aggressive and getting rid of credit card debt like this is never a bad idea.
Great advice there. Coming up, we have a refinance question and what the best use for a property with 2 houses on a big lot is. But first, Rob, where should I invest next?
Well, one cool announcement from BiggerPockets on the journey to help investors reach financial independence is that the Market Finder is now live on biggerpockets.com/markets with various heat maps to help show things like affordability, rent to price ratio, appreciation, and if you're a pro member, you get extra benefits like the top 25 best markets to invest in. So definitely check that out if you haven't, my friend. But outside of that, what do you have going on in your world?
Well, I got a couple properties in contract. They're both BRRRRs.
Noise.
So I found a couple properties, getting them fixed up. They're going to be rentals. I think I'm going to be making a new recording studio in one of them, and I'm probably going to move into it. So I don't know how long I'll be out of California, but I think I'm leaving California, and I'm going to be moving to the South.
So what's the city then? Where are you moving? Have you revealed to population Earth where you're going?
I haven't revealed the city yet. I have revealed that it's in the South, and I don't know how permanent it's going to be. I'm kind of going to be bouncing around some different areas in the South. I'm going to go check out the Carolinas, check out Alabama. Henry Washington's been telling me all about Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah.
He thinks I should visit it.
I used to live there.
I wanted to check out a couple other places in Florida, Tennessee. I was in Knoxville not too long ago, like that. And I hear Houston, Texas has a very handsome man.
That's right.
If you're into that kind of thing.
Dude. Man, I'm building a podcast studio in Houston, Texas. Imagine if we did BiggerPockets live, man. It'd be crazy.
Yeah. So that's what's kind of going on in my world. I'm back in the BRRRR seat, I suppose. How about you? What's new? You got another short-term rental under contract, right?
Yeah. Okay. What isn't new is probably a better question to ask. But okay. So I talked about this on the last Seeing Greene. I had to stop my house from getting demoed by the city of Houston. That was a shakeup. I was set to close, make $105K. Then we found out, oh, hey, city's demolishing your house. So I had to go and say, stop. So that was unfortunate because I was going to sell that house and do other things with that $105K. But I choose to see the silver lining here. And I actually am starting to turn over some stones, and I'm looking into building like a 10-10 property on there for pad split, which is a co-living and basically the rent by the room model. And then I am renovating a house down the road from here and launching that as an Airbnb here in Houston. Very excited. I've taken on most of the project management and remodel management, and actually have done a lot of the work myself. I feel like I'm past this, but every so often I like to make my life harder so that I can talk about this stuff and remember the glory days. And honestly, it's been a lot of work. It's been really frustrating, but I am really happy to sort of be back in the saddle and kind of launching my own Airbnbs again. So excited about that. That will be launching in the next couple of weeks. And that will be I think the most design forward property in Houston. That's my goal.
The most design forward. Can you share anything about what this design forward term means? Yeah,
it just means that a lot of the short-term rentals in Houston aren't really that great. They don't look that great. The design is 4 to 5 out of 10. I just don't think that there are a lot of super tip-top operators. I'm not saying that there's not. I just think that there's sort of a wide open market here for people that want to come in and do what we do at Funkit and kind of just go super, super crazy with the design and unique experience. So there's wallpaper on the ceilings, colors everywhere. It's going to be pretty cool. You'll have to come check it out when you move to Houston. And last thing, David, you know that I've been talking about reinvesting back into my properties. Well, I have a property in Bryan, Texas that was so-so Airbnb, and we just put about $30,000 into the backyard to basically, there's a shed back there. We put a ton of money into opening that shed up, putting new drywall, making it like a game day style home because it's home of A&M. And I put a pickleball court. I put a mini putt there, a cornhole. I mean, it's the whole 9 yards. And a lot of people often say, well, you went to UT. How dare you buy a house in College Station? But the way I like to see it is I'm taking Aggie's money, and that's okay with me.
This is something I'm going to have to learn if I move to the South. This whole college football thing, not a culture that I understand whatsoever, but I know it's intense.
Yeah, it's all good, though. My best friends are Aggies. I forgive them.
All right. Our next question comes from Tommy in Texas.
Hey, David and Rob. This is Tommy in San Antonio. It's been a minute. I have another question for you guys as the house hack turns. So again, I'm a veteran. I bought a duplex living in one side, working on renting out the other side as a by the room, medium-term rental for military personnel. I've been getting phone calls lately to do a VAIRRL. supposedly an easier way for us veterans to refinance and get into a lower rate. When I initially purchased the duplex, I did the 2-1 buy down. So my first year, I'm at a 5.15% interest. Second year, 6.15, and then it evens out at 7.15. I figured I need to get down to at least in the fives to actually make this a feasible decision. My big thing though is I've heard that when you refinance, it's almost like you start the clock over because your amortization schedule is going to be at the beginning, making more payments on interest, even though the interest rate is lower. So I wanted to know when you guys were in your acquisition stages or in the beginning of investing, how often did you actually refi? Or did you only refi if you could get another property? How do I think about it? And is rate as important, or should I, even if I do, should I refi the rate and keep the terms the same? Just a lot of stuff going in my head, trying to build something special in San Antonio. Definitely, again, thank you guys so much for your help.
All right, Rob, the why behind the refi. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so he asked, when I was getting started, how often did I refi? Well, the thing is, when you're getting started, most of the time you don't have a lot of money, and we're starting small and kind of scaling up accordingly. Now, some people are, of course, more aggressive than others. I ran out of money very quickly, and I had big dreams and aspirations, and literally the only way I could execute on those dreams and aspirations was one of two ways. Go partner and raise the money, which I did, or build equity, force equity in my property, refi, and use that money to go out and do new things. And I remember I got like a loan, and I paid all this money on the closing costs and everything like that. And like a year later, I had to refi to go out and basically get like a home equity line of credit, build a new construction. I felt really dumb, to be honest, because I think it was like, well over $5,000 in fees that I was paying to refi. And I didn't have it. I mean, that was like a lot of money back then for me. I mean, it still is, but it was just like, I was just like, man, I can't believe I'm making this really silly decision to close again and pay all these closing costs and basically get myself in more debt at the end of the day. But if it wasn't for that decision, I would not have gone on to basically build a new property, new construction, cash out refi, get all of that money back, and scale up my portfolio. So I think at the beginning, if it's a tool that you can use and you can afford the payments and you have a good financial foundation, I think it's okay to refi so long as what you're getting out of it is something greater than what you're getting right now. So he said, is the rate super important? No, the rate is not particularly important. What's important is the return and how much more cash flow you're getting as a result. I'm not saying it's unimportant, but what matters to me is ROI and cash on cash. And so if he can get like a better investment out of it, I don't mind refining.
All right, my thoughts on when to refinance. In general, I say don't refinance unless you need the money. I know that sounds obvious, but part of Tomi's question there was, should I wait till I need the money or should I refi just to refi? And I think that's because when we describe the BRRRR method or a refinance in general, we always just talk about it ends with a refinance, but we're not saying that obvious reason why is because you're going to buy more property. So if you have nothing to buy, you might not need to refinance. There's nothing wrong with letting your equity sit in your properties if you don't need the money for something else, because when you refinance, you do increase the debt that you're taking on and the amount of debt service that you're going to have to pay out for that. Now, in your case, Rob, you were trying to scale, you were trying to expand. So that's why you ran out of money fast, because there was more stuff that you wanted to buy. In a market where prices are going up, rents are going up, values are going up, you're probably going to be taking action quicker and more consistently. So you're going to be running out of money faster. So naturally, the refinance process is going to happen quicker. But in today's market, there's deals out there, but they're not as plentiful. They're not everywhere. You're going to have to look a lot longer for them. So you're going to move slower, which means you don't have to refinance as quickly. And Tomi also brought up some of the downsides to a refinance, like you set back your amortization schedule. So a higher portion of your payment goes to interest instead of principal if you do refinance a property. You're also having closing costs that are added to the balance. So you're losing a little bit of equity every time you do this because you're taking on more debt than you're getting back in cash. Now, overall, the healthiest way is if you're making and saving money through a business or your job, so you don't have to rely on equity in previous properties to buy future properties. You can do that, but I think it's preferable if you can make the money some other way, and then you don't have to refinance at all. You can just keep reinvesting the funds that you've been making or some combination of it. So I like the idea of only refinancing when you need the money. And maybe you keep enough money in your savings for the down payment of like one property, right? So if you find a property, you're like, all right, I'm spending the money I have in savings on this new property. I will also start the refinance of a second property to replenish that savings. So you kind of always have one down payment ready to go.
I agree. I think it's one of those things where don't take a refi lightly. You should be very strategic, and that's what I've done every single time that I've ever done it. So remember, the interest rate is this big scary number, but if you're getting a much better real estate deal as a result, then I think it's certainly worth considering. I've got a property, by the way, in LA that has a 3.25% interest rate, and I've got about $600,000 of equity in it. And boy, let me tell you, there have been a lot of times where I've started the refi process and I'm like, I don't want to. I keep going back and forth. But beautiful thing is that property has a great HELOC on it, and I just use that for the same thing. And I was able to actually do a lot of stuff with that HELOC as of late. So you don't always have to refi. Maybe sometimes there's like a HELOC solution out there for you.
Is this why you got that tattoo that says 3.25 until I die?
That's right.
All right. Our next question comes from Bora Moon in the East Bay of California, which is the same place that I currently live. Bora says, I bought 2 houses on one lot a few months ago. One of them is a 1,600 square foot house, the other a 550 square foot small house, but it's not an ADU. My initial plan was to update both homes, live in the main house, and rent out the downstairs of the main house and the smaller home. I would pay less than what I would have been coming out of pocket renting. And if I refinanced to a lower rate, I would save even more. Now, here's the thing. The small house has a backyard bigger than the building. It sits on the same size lot of the other 1,800 square foot houses around here. So I thought, what if I do an addition and turn it into a small single family house instead of a super small 550 square foot house? I could add hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity. And if I split the lot, I could sell one of them for a nice profit. The question is, how do I fund the construction? I'm currently using cash to renovate the main house whose ARV is $1.3 million. So one option would be to do a cash out refi and use the cash towards the rehab addition of the smaller house. But then can I split the lot and sell the small house after? Does it require another refinance? I have no idea how this would work. I'm also worried about rates going up through a cash out refinance. Another option would be liquidating stocks I already own and using that money to do the rehab. It feels a little risky to tap into my reserves, and I would prefer not to. Is there another option, or am I going too overboard with this, and should I just stick to my original plan? Am I missing something here? Please advise. Thanks so much. All right, Rob, we've got a lot of moving pieces. We've got a lot of upside. What do you think?
So this perfect example from the last question that we were just talking about, will getting you a refi really generate more wealth? Will it generate a better return? They just said here that if they do this addition on the property, they'll get hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity and build a lot of equity in their house doing that. So yeah, if they refi, they'll have a higher rate. But if they're adding $200,000-$300,000 to their net worth and adding $200,000-$300,000 in equity, that to me is a perfectly acceptable reason to drop a low interest rate, so long as they're not sacrificing a ton of cash flow or anything like that. But I don't think he is. Seems like he'll come out net positive across the board with the cash out refi.
Couple things that are concerning here. Before we even discuss splitting a lot and selling one of the units, you need to call the city or the county first and say, hey, how is this going to work? Do not spend any money. Do not put any plans into place until you know if they're going to honor that. A lot of the time, they're not going to do it.
That would never fly in LA. I mean, maybe there's a way to do it, but I had that same idea at a little 300 square foot ADU. And I remember thinking, man, I'll just split it off and sell it for $400K. And the city was like, no. And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
So definitely you want to verify that with your building and safety department.
California is like a grumpy father from the 1950s. They love to say no. Now, if you are able to split into 2 different lots, the question becomes very relevant of how much the small house is worth and how much the big house is worth. They have separate ARVs, and then we can confidently and accurately address whether you should make the small house bigger. If you're not able to put one lot into 2 and sell these as 2 different parcels with their own tax assessor's number, this becomes a moot point. It doesn't, you never know what an appraiser is going to give you if you've got two houses on one lot. They typically give you the square footage of the main house, and then they take some percentage of the square footage of the smaller unit, but you don't know how they're going to classify it. You don't know how they're going to value it. If there's not a lot of comps in the area where you're having houses with an ADU or two houses on one lot, there's really no way they can go by. I've seen somebody had a property with an ADU and they gave it almost no value. I've seen a person that had two houses on one lot and they gave the value of one of those houses the same as an ADU. It's such a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get when it comes to this. So the first step is you need to figure out, can we separate this one lot into two? If we cannot, making that second house bigger could give you equity, but you cannot count on that. And it could give you more cash flow, which you probably can count on. So if you're getting a sizable amount of increased rent to make the smaller house bigger, now we're talking. Because a renter isn't necessarily going to care if the lot has been split into two legally. They just want to know if they have the privacy of their own lot. So you could take these two houses on one lot, put fence in between them, give them their own driveways, and as far as a renter is concerned, that is their own property. It functions like one, even if legally it's not one. So if you're getting a really big increase in cash flow, forced cash flow here, I would look into expanding that smaller home and making it bigger.
Totally.
But your question was how to finance this. I think Rob and I are probably on the same page if I know this guy, which I think I do. Our stomach's a little bit queasy about this. We don't love all of the uncertainty and the variables in this equation for someone that doesn't already have the capital in the bank waiting to be spent. Is that the same thing you're thinking, Rob?
Yeah, they do kind of have the capital. They have equity in the house, not particularly capital, but they did say they have liquid stocks. The problem is when you sell stocks, you take a huge hit.
Yes.
So yeah, would I prefer them to have cash? Yes, but it does seem like they are financially stable.
Their capital's in the form of stocks or equity.
Yeah.
Right. So now not only are you taking risk by spending money to make this thing better, but you're taking additional risk by taking on more debt through getting the equity out of the home or taking a capital gains hit on selling your stocks and losing the future upside of the stock. So you're trading a relative amount of certainty for a large degree of uncertainty. That's where my hesitancy comes on this deal. I feel like the whole thing becomes clear if you can split this one lot into two. Now it just becomes a very simple understanding of, I have a 550 square foot house on its own lot. If it was a 1,500 square foot house, what would it be worth? There's no way an appraiser can fight with you on this. It's not subjective anymore. Really, I guess that's like the kind of the linchpin, this whole thing. Do you see any angle that I'm missing here?
Well, I mean, I'm just going off of their assumptions that they would get a couple $100,000 of equity by just renovating everything. And if that's the case, I think they could just do a straight cash out refi and just renovate everything. But like, there's kind of like 3 or 4 scenarios that they crammed into this. So I think really, before they move forward, they have to really ask themselves what it is they're trying to get out of this. Are they going for equity? Are they going for cash flow? Are they trying to split this so they can sell one property and make a ton of money? Because while all are really great things, if they're trying to do everything at once, it's going to make this whole plan a nightmare because they're trying to solve for they're trying to check every single box. So I think if your number one goal is cash flow, figure out what that plan is to get you the most cash flow. If your number one goal is more equity, more net worth, figure out how to do that. If your goal is, how can I make $700,000 and get a huge lump of cash, then go for that. But right now, it honestly feels pretty unclear what the vision is. I don't blame them. They have a lot of options, which isn't a bad thing. But in this scenario, it can actually distort clarity pretty easily. Because right now, I'm like, I don't know. I guess you could. All of this is feasible. What do you want more? Equity, cash flow, or cash?
Great point. There's also the element of this person bought a property with a lot of potential. I've seen this happen many times with investors, and they're trying to maximize the use of the property to its highest and best use. And you can't see the forest for the trees. You get lost in the details of this specific property without even asking yourself, if I'm going to dump $300,000 into something, would I be better off to just go buy a fixer somewhere else and I can add more equity, more straightforward? Even though you can improve this property, is this the highest and best use of your capital and your time and your energy and your attention to throw it into this thing? Look at a couple other opportunities in different areas, different states, or even buying another property like this before you commit to going all in on a complicated rehab like this.
Oh, one thing I was going to say. Never mind.
No, you got to say it now. You've created a cliffhanger.
You said life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And I'm like, inside the box of chocolates, there's pictures of the chocolates and exactly what you're going to get. So it begs the question if that little picture guide existed before Forrest Gump came out as a movie.
Just thought about that.
Or if Forrest Gump influenced the chocolate industry. And I think that's something we should all think about over the next few days.
Let us know in the comments on YouTube if you think that those pictures existed before Steven Spielberg produced Forrest Gump or if that came later. All right, everybody. Not only have we talked about chocolates and tattoos, we've also talked about quite a bit of real estate. We've talked about how to use the sneaky rental strategy when you're having trouble qualifying for another loan, how to handle bookkeeping as you scale, refi considerations, when to take on a massive and confusing project versus keeping it simple, when to use secured versus unsecured debt to consolidate payments, and what advice of Dave Ramsey Rob and I both like. And remember, we want you to be featured on a future episode of Seeing Greene. So please head over to biggerpockets.com/David, where you can submit your question, or you can send it to me on social media. If you want to follow Rob and I, our social media handles are in the show description, so please go check us out there. And lastly, please make sure you subscribe to the show to be notified when future episodes come out, and leave us a comment and let us know, what do you think about the great chocolate debate? This is David Greene for Rob, Stupid Is As Stupid Does Abasolo, signing off.
I'm not a smart man, Davey, but I know what ROI is.